This is absolutely revolting. Lady Alara hissed as her slender hand slid across something slick and cold. Her fingers recoiled instantly, flicking away whatever unholy substance clung to them. The dim glow of bioluminescent fungi spread across the tunnel walls, washing her in an eerie green light that made her look almost ethereal, like a goddess dragged down into a pit of nightmares. Except this goddess now had sewage dripping from her once pristine sleeves. Behind her, a low chuckle rumbled, rich with amusement. Aiden Lawson leaned against the tunnel wall, armored shoulders brushing slime without a second thought, his sharp jaw twitching as he fought to contain his laughter. "You said you wanted adventure," he reminded her casually, voice deep and edged with mock innocence. "I meant exploration," she snapped, twisting around to glare at him. Her golden eyes burned like molten suns, framed by hair as white and perfect. As crystalline frost, though now tangled, streaked with muck she didn't dare identify. Discovery, artifacts, the mysteries of the ancients. Not, she flinched as her knees sank into something disturbingly soft. Not crawling through waste. Like some some gutter-born rodent. Aiden grinned openly now, no longer bothering to hide his amusement. "You're the one who insisted on joining the mission, Your Highness," he said, rolling his shoulders as he crouched low to follow her through the narrow crawlspace. His black combat suit was smeared with grime, but he moved like he didn't care. Probably didn't. "For the record, I suggested the rooftops. You shot that down because it was too visible. Guess the sewers weren't what you pictured, huh?" Elara's voice dripped venom. "You will pay for this, human." "Oh, I'm sure," he drawled, dark beard shadowing the smirk, tugging at his lips. His easy tone was infuriating. Always calm, always in control. She hated that about him. Hated more. That he was right, because despite every fiber of her aristocratic pride screaming in horror, she was still crawling. Still pressing forward. The air was damp, heavy with the stench of rot and something chemical. Water or something pretending to be water sloshed around their boots. Aiden's boots were regulation-grade sealed combat issue. Elara wore ceremonial travel gear that had cost more credits than most soldiers would see in a decade. It was ruined beyond salvation. "You know," Aiden continued lazily, his voice a dark thread in the silence, "you're handling this better than most nobles would. Didn't think you had it in you." Elara stiffened, every word striking at the core of her pride. "I am a daughter of the Crystal Spires," she declared, lifting her chin even as filth dripped from her jawline. "We do not break under indignity." "Funny," Aiden said, grinning in the gloom. "Because right now, you look like the galaxy's most elegant sewer rat." Her hiss could have flayed Nettle. She vowed, silently and vividly, to make this human regret every mocking word. Perhaps an endless series of excruciatingly dull diplomatic receptions. Perhaps formal lectures on meditative crystal arrangements. She knew 600 variations by heart. Yes, he would suffer. Then it happened. A sound rolled through the tunnels, deep and metallic, reverberating off stone and filth. Elara froze. Mid-crawl, her skin paling to a lighter shade of green. The bioluminescent fungi trembled, scattering faint motes of light across the slime-coated walls. Aiden's posture shifted in an instant. Gone was the relaxed, mocking soldier. Now every muscle coiled tight with alertness. His eyes narrowed, scanning the darkness ahead. The faint gleam of his combat knife flashed as he drew it without a sound. "Please tell me," Elara whispered, voice tight. "That is part of the normal sewage system." Aiden shook his head slowly, listening. His augmented hearing caught the faint rhythm beneath the rumble, a grinding whir, like ancient servos waking from centuries of slumber. "That," he said grimly, "is not plumbing." The sound grew louder, closer, like a predator slithering through the bones of the city. The tunnel walls quivered as dust sifted from cracks overhead. Aiden's grip tightened on his blade. He shot a glance back at her, his dark eyes catching the greenish glow. "Stay behind me, Your Highness," he said, voice low and edged with steel. Now, for the first time since crawling into this nightmare, Elara didn't argue. Far ahead, in the murky gloom, something moved. Something big. And the sewers, for all their stench, suddenly didn't feel disgusting anymore. They felt like a grave. The rumble turned into a shriek of tortured metal. A crack split the wall ahead, spraying filth as a jagged steel limb punched through. Segmented and glistening with slick sewage, the appendage writhed like something alive, except its joints pulsed with red lights, and its surface bore the corroded sigils of an ancient maintenance unit. Elara recoiled with a strangled sound, her once composed poise shattering as the tentacle whipped sideways, carving a trench in the slime-slick wall where her head had been moments ago. "What in the name of the crystal spires?" Her voice broke as the appendage retracted, then stabbed. Forward again with mechanical precision. "Move!" Aiden's command cracked like a gunshot. He lunged, seizing her by the waist, and yanked her back just as another limb scythed through the space she'd occupied. The force sent her sprawling against his chest, her delicate fingers digging into his armor as the tunnel shook around them. The thing roared a grinding, metallic bellow that sent shivers up Aiden's spine. From the breach, its bulk surged into view. It was no ordinary maintenance drone. Whatever had slumbered down here had evolved into a nightmare, a fusion of rusted plating, rotating saw arms, and writhing hydraulic tendrils that scraped the walls like knives through bone. Optical sensors glowed crimson, tracking them with predatory intent. "That's a cleaning unit?" Elara gasped, her voice scaling into disbelief as another tentacle smashed into the ceiling, showering them with debris. "Used to be," Aiden growled, his mind racing. Guess centuries without supervision made it cranky. His rifle was slung over his back, but in the cramped tunnel, it would be dead weight. His knife glinted in the fungus glow, utterly inadequate against the metal monstrosity. They needed distance dash now. The drone lunged. Aiden shoved Elara ahead, barking, "Run!" The tunnel became chaos-slick stone, choking heat, and the relentless shriek of grinding servos. Tentacles stabbed and slashed, missing them by inches as they half-crawled, half-sprinted through the fetid passage. The stench clung like a second skin, but Aiden barely noticed. His world had narrowed to the pounding of his heart, the frantic scrape of Alara's boots ahead, and the death machine crashing through walls behind them. "This is your idea of an infiltration route?" Elara screamed over the din, her voice equal parts terror and rage. "Hey," Aiden shot back, panting, "beats tea with giant spiders. I will drown you in tea if we live through this." A tentacle lashed past, gouging a groove into the wall beside her head. Sparks showered the darkness. She bit back another shriek, forcing herself to keep moving. Every instinct screamed to curl up and pray, but furious pride drove her forward. She would not die in sewage. And she would not give this smug human the satisfaction of seeing her break. The tunnel narrowed ahead, bending sharply left. Aiden's combat instincts flared. He skidded to a halt, scanning the junction, and cursed under his breath. The drone wasn't slowing. Its bulk slammed through the corridor behind, tearing out chunks of ancient masonry like paper. "We'll never outrun it," Elara panted, voice trembling despite her bravado. Her luminous eyes flicked to him, wide and desperate. "Tell me you have a plan." Aiden's jaw clenched. Improvisation was his plan. His fingers closed around a palm-sized device. At his belt a relic he'd scavenged from an abandoned Rion outpost months ago. Useless then. Maybe a miracle now. "Yeah," he said, forcing a grin he didn't feel. "Don't die." Before she could retort, he slammed his thumb onto the activator. A pulse of blue light erupted, rippling through the tunnel like a silent shockwave. The drone convulsed mid-lunge, its limbs spasming as its sensors flickered wildly. The monstrous shriek pitched into static, then chaos. "Now!" Aiden barked, grabbing Alara's arm. They ran, not crawled, not stumbled, but ran, bent double through the filth as behind them. The machine flailed blindly, tentacles carving aimless arcs through the darkness. They burst into a broader section of the tunnel, a half-collapsed maintenance junction reeking of stagnant water and ozone. Aiden dragged her toward a narrow alcove carved into the wall, barely large enough for two bodies. They slammed inside, pressed tight against each other as the pulse faded and the drone sensors recalibrated with a chilling, rising hum. Ilara's breath came fast and shallow, her chest crushed against his armor. Her skin radiated heat despite the chill, and Aiden was suddenly painfully aware of the soft curves molded to his body, of her hair white as starlight sticking damply to her cheeks, of her luminous eyes burning holes through him in the gloom. "You're?" She swallowed hard, voice shaking with adrenaline and something else. "You're insane." "Not insane," he whispered, listening to the drone's distorted roars echo down the tunnel. His arm raced protectively around her, every nerve screaming alert. "Just very hard to kill." The sound faded slightly. "Not gone, not yet, but distant enough for a few stolen breaths." Ilara exhaled, her forehead resting against his chest. One unguarded second. When she lifted her gaze, the molten gold of her eyes shimmered with something unfamiliar, gratitude. And maybe, under that, something dangerously close to admiration. Asterisk. Outside, the drone screeched, metal grinding like a demon's laughter. Inside the alcove, two species that were never meant to share more than formal courtesies pressed close, hearts pounding in unison. And for the first time, Ilara wondered if crawling through filth wasn't the most scandalous part of this mission. Asterisk, the tunnel spat them into a yawning cavity where shadows hung thick and damp. The distant screech of the drone faded, replaced by the soft hiss of leaking pipes and the low thrum of ancient machinery. Aiden guided Ilara along a cracked causeway until the darkness broke into a ghostly glow. "Thank every star in the void," she breathed, her voice cracking on the edge of hysteria and relief. Ahead, embedded into the wall like a relic of a forgotten age, a decontamination chamber pulsed faint blue, its crystalline surface still humming faintly with power. "Looks like we hit the jackpot," Aiden muttered, sweeping his gaze across the chamber. The structure's walls gleamed with translucent panels, conduits running like veins through its surface. He ran a quick diagnostic on the panel, and to his amazement, the system flickered obediently to life. "Functional," he said, turning back to her with a wolfish grin. "And just in time. You smell like something died in its own filth." Ilara's luminous eyes narrowed to slits. "You are insufferable," she hissed, but the tremor in her voice betrayed the truth. She was desperate to feel clean again. Her silken robes clung to her in dark, sodden patches, and strands of her pristine white hair were plastered against her cheeks. Even now filthy, shaken, trembling, she radiated an otherworldly grace that made Aiden's pulse hammer in his ears. "Less commentary, more activation," she snapped, already fumbling at the fastenings of her ceremonial outer layers with aristocratic indignation. Fabric that had once shimmered like starlight, now peeled away in damp, ragged folds, landing in a heap of ruined elegance at her feet. Aiden arched a brow. "Bossy, you nobles are all the same. And you humans are all crude and irritating." She shot back without looking at him, stepping into the crystalline enclosure with a spine rod straight. Her chin lifted in defiance, even as her movements betrayed urgency. "Initiate the cycle." "You're welcome." he said dryly, fingers dancing over the alien interface until the chamber flared to life. A pulse of blue radiance rolled across her body, lifting grime and sewage like a second skin. Steam rose in soft tendrils as light threaded over her form-fitting underlayer, an iridescent bodysuit that clung to every elegant curve like molten glass. Aiden swallowed hard, throat suddenly dry. His pulse skittered out of rhythm as the field caressed her shape, tracing hips, waist, the long line of her legs. For a moment, he forgot about drones, tunnels, missions, forgot everything, but the silhouette framed in luminous haze, like a living star reborn in blue fire. "You're staring," she murmured without opening her eyes, her voice soft and wicked. A curl of amusement laced the aristocratic chill. "Can you blame me?" he said, and there was no teasing in his tone, now only raw honesty that scraped against her defenses like steel on glass. Ilara's lips curved faintly, the corners tugging in a way that might have been a smile or a dare. Her lashes lifted, and those molten gold eyes locked on his, shimmering with something dangerous, something that sent heat flooding through his veins. "Such a romantic," she murmured, tilting her head. "Do you always seduce women in sewage reclamation units, human?" "Only the exceptional ones," he said softly, stepping closer as the glow died down, the chamber doors sliding open with a whisper. Steam drifted between them like ghostly fingers, curling around two bodies drawn into each other's gravity. For one taut, breathless moment, neither spoke. Ilara's damp hair floated like threads of moonlight in the soft mist, her skin glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in sync with her quickening heartbeat. His hand rose without thought, brushing a streak of moisture from her jaw, lingering where her pulse thrummed wild beneath his fingertips. "You know this is highly improper," she said, her voice a husky whisper now, trembling with something far. "From fear, for my kind." "For me, improper," Aiden echoed, his thumb tracing the elegant angle of her cheek. "Yeah, guess we'll both have to live with that." She leaned in before her mind could marshal protest, before centuries of breeding, and decorum could cage her rebellion. Their lips met soft at first, tasting of heat and salt and something electric, a collision of worlds wrapped in breathless inevitability. Her fingers curled into the rigid seams of his armor, clutching like a drowning soul to a lifeline. His other hand splayed against the small of her back, feeling the hum of alien physiology, a subtle vibration that sang against his palm. When they broke apart, her eyes blazed brighter than any crystal in the spires. "By the architects," she whispered, dazed and breathless. "What have we done?" Before he could answer, the ground beneath their feet trembled. A sound rolled through the tunnels low, metallic, and hungry. Aiden's head snapped up. "Drones." "Back," he muttered, the moment fracturing like glass. Ilara's glow dimmed to a cold, furious green as she dragged herself from the spell of his touch. "This conversation," she hissed, yanking her weapon from the wall mount, "is far from over." "No argument here," Aiden replied, already checking his pulse rifle. His grin, however, was pure devilry. "Though I've got to say, improper's starting to feel pretty damn right." The next impact shook the chamber, dust cascading from the ceiling. The nightmare machine was closing in, and they were out of time. The tunnel beyond the decontamination chamber sloped downward, narrowing until the walls pressed close like the throat of some sleeping beast. Aiden led the way, rifle raised, his senses sharpened to a razor's edge. Every sound was amplified in the silence, the drip of fetid water, a distant metallic rasp of the drone hunting them, the soft, quick rhythm of Ilara's breathing behind him. She moved differently now. Gone was the brittle aristocratic stiffness, the highborn disdain. What replaced it was something leaner, sharper, a woman, forged by necessity, her pride tempered into something harder and far more dangerous. When her voice came, it was low, steady, and stripped of pretense. Tell me, human, does every mission of yours involve sewage and homicidal machinery? Aiden grinned despite the tension. Only the fun ones. Her answering snort was soft, but it carried a note he hadn't heard before, something almost like amusement. Then the tunnel opened, abruptly and impossibly, into light. The shift was so sudden, it stole Ilara's breath. She stumbled to a halt, her fingers curling against the wall as her eyes adjusted. The darkness fell away, replaced by a sphere of radiant brilliance. They stood on the threshold of a vast chamber, its walls alive with pulsing crystalline structures that sprouted like frozen lightning, arcing upward to meet in a dome of luminous geometry. The air hummed with energy, vibrating through her bones, through her blood, until she felt more resonance than flesh. By the spires, the whisper left her unbidden, reverent. She took a step forward, her eyes wide, drinking in the impossible beauty. The crystals weren't inert. They pulsed slow, rhythmic like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. Filaments of light wove through the formations, shifting in complex mathematical harmonics that teased the edge of comprehension. Aiden swept the rifle in a slow arc, scanning the perimeter. This is not what I expected, he admitted, and for once, there was no sarcasm in his voice, only raw awe. His boots crunched on a floor that shimmered faintly beneath a skin of translucent crystal, patterns spiraling outward from a central monolith dot. The monolith drew Ilara like gravity. It towered in the chamber's heart, a faceted spire that throbbed with a deep cerulean glow. She reached for it without thinking, her fingers brushing the cool, glass-like surface, and the universe-ignited dot light exploded across the chamber, cascading in waves of color that bent and fractured into living patterns. Symbols bloomed in the Yasim air, glyphs of impossible intricacy rotating around her in concentric rings. Aiden swore, throwing up an arm against the glare, but Ilara stood frozen, bathed in radiance, her bioluminescent skin flaring until she seemed carved from starlight. Ilara! Aiden lunged toward her, but a force like liquid air surged outward, shoving him back a step. Not violent, simply immovable. His rifle clattered against the floor as he fought against the unseen pressure, his pulse thundering. Then, voice came. Welcome, children of the stars. The words reverberated through the crystal chamber. Neither sound nor light, but both, harmonics threading through marrow and nerve. Before them, the air shimmered, and a figure coalesced, woven of photons and memory. It was tall, graceful, its outline echoing Ilara's form, but elongated, perfected, crowned with crystalline spines that blazed like suns. Its eyes were pools of molten gold, its voice a choir of resonant tones. If you are here, it intoned, the convergence has begun. Aiden's gut nodded. He edged closer to Ilara, one hand hovering near his sidearm, even though some primal instinct told him weapon would mean nothing here. Who the hell are you? He demanded. The entity regarded him with an almost tender amusement. We are the architects, it said, and its voice thrummed with the weight of ions. The weavers of possibility, the gardeners of form. When the cosmos was young, we saw in your worlds the seeds of harmony, and so we guided them. Ilara's throat worked, but no sound came. She stared at the being, her mind unraveling under the flood of implications. Guided? She managed, her voice hoarse. Yes, Ilara of the Spires, the architect said gently. Your people were given the gift of crystal resonance, the power to shape matter, to weave energy with thought. To the humans, it turned its burning gaze to Aiden. We bestowed the gift of adaptation, the unyielding will to endure and transform. Alone, each species could rise only so far. Together. The chamber shivered as the voice deepened, resonant as a collapsing star. Together, You will transcend. Aiden felt something icy coil down his spine. You're saying, he swallowed, you engineered us. Not engineered, guided, nudged along paths where greatness might bloom. The figure lifted a hand of light, and patterns flared across the chamber visions of future wonders. Colossal starships, grown from living crystal, cities strung between suns, beings of hybrid grace striding through nebular storms. But this destiny unlocks only when your kind and hers unite, when will and harmony entwine, when flesh and crystal sing as one. Elara's breath hitched as the monolith pulsed beneath her palm, threads of light crawling up her arm like molten veins. The resonance in her blood surged, wild and electric, and when she looked at Aiden's sweat streaking his brow, dark eyes wide and burning something inside her shifted irrevocably. United how? Aiden asked warily, though part of him already knew. The part that remembered her lips on his in the steam. The part that remembered how perfectly she'd fit against him. The architect's voice softened, almost smiling. In bond. In choice. In trust forged through fire and imperfection. You are the first, but not the last. What you choose here will echo through the marrow of empires. The light dimmed, leaving only their harsh breathing and the distant drip of water breaking the silence. Aiden looked at Elara. Elara looked back, eyes glowing like suns, chest heaving, her aristocratic masks shattered into something raw, fierce, and luminous. Whatever came next, it would change everything behind them. The drone's metallic shriek cut through the chamber like a death knell. Asterisk, the chamber vibrated with the drone's metallic scream, a jagged sound that shattered the fragile stillness like a blade through glass. Red warning glyphs flickered across the crystalline walls as if the ancient systems themselves recognized the threat. The architect's holographic form began to dissolve, scattering like dust in a solar wind, but its final words lingered, threads of sound braided into Elara's bones. What you choose here will echo through empires. Aiden snapped his rifle. From the floor, bracing it against his shoulder in one fluid motion, his pulse spiked with cold clarity. No time to process destiny. No time to think about the golden fire in Elara's eyes, or the heat still clinging to his skin from their kiss. Survive first. Wonder later. The chamber's main arch convulsed as the drone tore through, a nightmare silhouette haloed by cascading shards of crystal. Its limbs writhed like a nest of steel serpents, each tipped with talons honed by centuries of mutation. Optical sensors blazed crimson, locking onto heat signatures, their heat signatures with feral precision. Stay behind. Me. Aiden barked, swinging the rifle toward the advancing mass. The first burst slammed into its chassis, bolts sparking against corroded plating, but the thing didn't flinch. It screamed a shriek that made the walls hum in sympathetic agony. Lunged, Aiden shoved Elara sideways, his shoulder colliding with hers as a tentacle smashed the floor where she'd stood. Stone and crystal erupted in a hail of shards. She hit the ground hard, her weapon skittering across the slick floor. For a heartbeat, panic flared, but then pride surged, molten and furious. She was not some fragile ornament to be shielded. Her hand closed around a splinter of crystal as long as her forearm, its edge sharp as broken starlight. Energy thrummed through it, answering something deep in her blood. She rose in one lithe motion, skirts slashed and filthy, hair wild, eyes incandescent, and drove the shard into a whipping limb as it lashed toward Aiden. The impact detonated. Like a THUNDERCLAP, the shard pulsed with alien resonance, sending shockwaves up the drone's appendage. Metal blistered and split, molten seams glowing like embers in the dark. The machine recoiled with an unearthly bellow, limbs flailing, sparks spattering the air like meteor showers. Aiden froze for half a breath, stunned not by the damage, but by the figure before him. Alara stood like a vision torn from some forgotten epic, bare-armed, skin slick with sweat and phosphorescent glow, hair streaming in a halo of white fire, eyes blazing with defiance. Aristocratic fragility was gone. What stared back at him was something feral, magnificent. His gut tightened with a rush of something he didn't dare name. "You." "Improvised," he managed, voice rough. Her smile was pure fire. "Adaptation," she said, spitting his earlier word back at him like a challenge. "Isn't that your specialty?" The drone lunged again, shrieking, but this time they moved. As one, Aiden rolled under a scything limb, firing point-blank into a nest of exposed servos as Alara vaulted across the rubble, her crystalline blade singing arcs of blue light. Sparks cascaded around them. Metal screamed. Stone split. They were chaos incarnate, two worlds colliding in perfect, lethal harmony. When the thing finally collapsed, its core rupturing in a sunburst of energy, the silence that followed rang louder than battle. Aiden staggered back, chest heaving, sweat and grime streaking his face. Alara dropped her makeshift blade, her breath hitching in shallow gasps, skin flushed an iridescent green that pulsed faintly with the echo of combat. For a long moment, they just stared at each other across the wreckage. Two silhouettes limned in crystalline glow, hearts pounding in tandem, the weight of what had happened and what would happen pressing in like a gravity well dot. Then Aiden moved. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, his hands closing around. Her arms not rough, not gentle, just there, anchoring her in the maelstrom. Her head tipped back, eyes wide, lips parted as if to speak, but the words drowned under the hunger in his gaze, the raw, burning need that had nothing to do with destiny and everything to do with her. "Tell me," he said, voice husky, breath mingling with hers. "Tell me you don't feel it." Alara's pulse thundered in her ears, every instinct warring against centuries of protocol, of propriety. She was a daughter of the crystal spires, bred for poise, for perfection, for cold-blooded decorum. But right now smeared with grime, trembling from battle, standing in the wreckage of an ancient secret, she had never felt more alive, or more willing to burn. "I feel it," she whispered. The kiss struck like a detonation, like stars colliding, like every law of nature folding inward. His hands fisted in her ruined bodysuit, hers tangling in the damp chaos of his hair, pulling, clutching, devouring. Heat roared between them, obliterating the stink of sewage and smoke, turning the crystal glow into something molten. She made a sound soft, startled, utterly undone, and he swallowed it like oxygen dot when they broke. Breathless and raw, her forehead pressed to his. Her voice was a tremor against his mouth. "Do you understand what this means? If we return with this knowledge, everything changes. My people, yours, the council will. Let them choke on it," Aiden rasped, tracing the curve of her jaw with a touch that shook despite all his. "Steel, whatever they do, whatever they try, they can't take this away." Her laugh broke like glass-shocked, wild, almost disbelieving. "You arrogant, impossible human." "Guilty," he murmured, before stealing another kiss, slower this time, deep enough to brand her bones. The architect's words pulsed in the silence that followed. Bond, choice, harmony. Their bodies trembled with it. Their blood sang with it, their very cells vibrating like strings to the same impossible note. And yet, beyond the shattered drone and the crystalline glow, the future loomed vast and merciless. What they had ignited here would not be contained. It would blaze through empires like wildfire. "Together," Alara said at last, voice fierce and soft. All at once, as if tasting the word for the first time. Aiden's smile was slow, feral, devastating. "Damn right." Behind them, the crystal spire pulsed brighter, louder, as if the chamber itself bore witness to a truth older than stars. The journey back to the surface felt surreal. The tunnels, once a labyrinth of rot and darkness, now seemed almost insignificant compared to the weight of what pulsed in their veins. Alara walked beside Aiden in silence, her once impeccable posture softened into something new. Not weakness, but release. Her ceremonial robes were gone, her base suit torn and smeared, hair flowing wild down her back. She looked nothing like the polished daughter of the crystal spires who had descended hours ago, and everything like the woman who had shattered. Centuries of propriety in a single choice. When they emerged beneath the fractured sky of the old city, twin moons casting pale fire across the ruins, Aiden lifted his cum unit with hands that trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer enormity of what they carried. The architect's data crystal throbbed faintly against his chest, a heart within a heart. One transmission, one signal, and the universe would never be the same. The assembly hall of the crystal spires blazed with light. Even Aiden, hardened by years of Black Ops warfare and scarred planets, had to swallow hard. The chamber soared like a cathedral, carved from living diamond, every surface resonating with harmonic frequencies that shimmered through his bones. Rows of Solarian dignitaries sat in concentric arcs, their robes like rivers of crystallized starlight. Opposite them, the Terran delegation stood in crisp military blacks, faces carved into masks of authority. Between those two worlds, Aiden and Alara walked side by side. The hall fell silent, not with the hush of curiosity, but the charged stillness of a coming storm. Eyes burned into them, suspicion, awe, outrage barely leashed. Alara felt the weight of every gaze like chains on her skin, but she kept her head high, her golden eyes defiant. If they expected contrition, they would be disappointed. Aiden leaned slightly toward her as they approached the central dais. "Smile, princess," he murmured under his breath. "They already hate us. Might as well give him a good show." Her lips twitched despite the knot in her chest. "You are impossible." "And you love it," he shot back, the words so low only she could hear. Her heart stuttered, not because he was wrong, but because he said it like truth, not tease. Reached the core platform. The spire's grand harmonic arrays shimmered, filling the air with an expectant hum. Alara placed the data crystal into the conduit, and the hall exploded with light. Glyphs spiraled upward in cascades of brilliance, weaving across the vaulted ceiling in strands of molten geometry. A ripple of sound surged through the hall, pure, resonant tones that thrummed in marrow and thought alike. The architect's voice spoke, not in words, but in harmonics that translated in every mind. "Children of soul, children of the crystal spires. The long design is fulfilled." Gasps fractured the silence. Faces turned as shimmering projections ignited across the hall. Visions of the future that scorched themselves into the retina. Starships grown from crystal and steel, vast latticework. Cities strung between suns. Beings of hybrid grace striding through the fire of newborn stars. Unity, symbiosis, evolution beyond imagining. The hell is this? A Terran general barked, his voice cracking the spell. Alara stepped forward, her voice carrying like a blade drawn from silk. "This is truth. Your suspicions, your xenophobia, our arrogance, none of it matters now. Our species were guided long before history began. Not for domination, not for conquest, for convergence." A ripple of shock tore through the Solarian ranks. One elder surged to his feet, robes flaring like shards of starlight. "Blasphemy! No noble daughter would—" "Spare me your dogma," Alara snapped, her voice ringing against crystal vaults like a struck chord. "I crawled through the filth you fear. I bled for this knowledge. I fought beside a human when death clawed at our throats. And I chose—" Her voice faltered, then steadied, fierce as fire. I chose what your councils never dared, to see beyond pride, to see the pattern. She turned, finding Aiden's gaze across the blaze of glyph light. His jaw was set, his eyes dark with that unflinching steadiness that had anchored her when everything else shattered. Without breaking that connection, she extended her hand, not to the council, not to the hall, but to him. A low murmur rippled like distant thunder as he stepped into the light. The Terran general's face tightened. Lawson, think about what you're already did, Aiden cut in, his voice like gravel over steel. He took Alara's hand, fingers closing around hers in a grip that felt like a vow written in blood and stars alike. And I'm done thinking. The hall erupted not into chaos, but into revelation. All at once, patterns flared across the assembly arrays, broadcasting biometric harmonics as the architect's system sensed to the joining of two species, not theoretically, not diplomatically, but viscerally. The resonance stormed through the chamber, sweeping robes into halos of light, making steel epaulets sing. Holoscreens blazed with metrics no one alive had ever seen. Two frequencies becoming one dot, and then came the second shock. From the back, Rose movement stirred furtive, then bolder as others rose. A Solarian trade minister and his Terranade, hands intertwined like contraband. A research chief, pale and sweating, standing shoulder to shoulder with the Solarian scientist beside him. Here and there, whispers bloomed into confessions, into defiance, until the hall fractured under the weight of its own secrets. You see? Alara's voice cut through the clamor, fierce and exultant. It has already begun. The architect's voice thundered again, sealing the truth with harmonic finality. Bond acknowledged. Convergence initiated. Prepare for ascension. And, just like that, history broke. Later, when the clamor had spilled into strategy and treaties, when projections of the future still shimmered like auroras above the spire, Aiden found her on a balcony overlooking the night-veiled gardens. Starlight tangled in her hair like molten silver, and for a long time he just looked at the fire in her gaze, the defiance etched into her bones, the curve of her mouth that had undone him in a sewer and never stopped undoing him since. Hell of a day, he said at last, his voice rough with the weight of everything and the wonder of what was still theirs. Alara turned, the cool fire of her eyes softening in a way that was for him alone. Do you realize, she murmured, that our great romance began in sewage? His grin was slow and devastating. Guess that means everything after this is uphill. She laughed then, bright, unguarded, crystalline, and the sound seemed to make the stars lean closer. He caught her around the waist, pulling her in, and her protest melted against his mouth in a kiss that tasted of rebellion and infinity. Behind them, the crystal spires sang. Ahead of them, the universe waited. The END ***.